Hello guys, welcome to another session of SQL tutorial videos. Okay, today we will cover lesson 5, that is select and from statements in depth. Okay, so I will start with from statement, which is really quick to cover, and then we will transition to select statements, and in select statements we will get to know all of the different inbuilt functions, but we will only start with this session. We need a whole another session about the common built-in functions for the different data types. Okay, so let's get started with from. So I set up again a script for you. So I will create a download link for you as well, so you can recreate all the examples that we do here. So we already talked about select from, where group by having order by examples, so you should be pretty familiar with what we can do. Of course, a group by is very complicated, and don't be afraid, we will cover of course group by itself when we get into grouping and aggregating, but for now we want to go on with the from case. Okay, we start with the from clause. So the from clause indicates what table you want to take for your data query. So what table you want to query. Okay, you can apply operators like joins on that from clause, but we will cover joins of course in another session, in our own session. You can refer to a table in the from clause with either three-part identifier, that would be the database name, the schema name, and the table name, always separated by dots. But you can also refer to it as two-part identifier, that is just the schema name and the table name. So you have to know that you execute your queries always in a kind of context. So for instance, I am here, as you can see in the top left corner, in the master database. So if I would query now a table like we see it here, person.person, we will search for in the master data, in the master database, in the person schema, we want to select the person table. Okay, but I can also change this here, the context, to let's say AdventureWorks 2012. Then we will have, then we are looking with this statement in a table called person, in the schema person, on the database AdventureWorks 2012. If we just state from master.person.person, it would search for we would query the table person, in the schema person, in the database master. Although we are currently moving in the context of this, a three-part identifier explicitly states a certain table. Okay, but of course in master there is not such a table, because we will delete this. We will refer to it as the two-part identifier. Okay, so you can see it like here. The two-part identifier would be this, the person table in the person schema, and this would be the three-part identifier. Let's just change the context in the top here to, let's say, DW. Then we will see there is no such a table here, but this query will still work, since we are explicitly saying we want to have the AdventureWorks 2012 database instead of the data warehouse database, the DW. Okay, so this is about the from clause. You also can rename your table, because of course this table is long, and if you have a join or something, you have to refer, you have then more than one table, and you have to state what column you want from what table. And of course you would rewrite person dot whatever column. For instance, you would have to refer to the person type as person dot person type in the select clause, but we will cover the select clause soon. But instead you can just rename your table just for the query. Of course, it's not an actual rename. According to the database, it still remains the same table, but for the query you rename it so that you can refer in other parts of the query with the alias. So you said here you can alias or rename tables with or without an s. So for instance, you can rename, in this query here, we rename the table person lying in the schema person as E, just E. Okay, and in this second example we're doing the same thing, but we just take a blank space between person and the E. So you can take the S or you can leave it, it's up to you, both will work. So for instance, in this query we take the business entity ID, the first name and the last name from the table E now, And in the second one, we take it as well, but we can also state now the alias e dot business and so on and so forth. It will also work. What won't work is when we alias the table, when we gave a new name to the table in the query, and then we are referring to it still with the old name. This won't work, since now for the query it's renamed, and he says there is no such table person now, because in the query we just renamed it to E. Using as is recommended, I tell it you from the start, because it's easier to read. You can really read, okay, the person is treated as E, but here you have difficulties to understand, because you can also refer to several tables with comma. Then you would say like this, you would refer to a table person dot person and table E. Of course it's not valid, but it's difficult to read, so I recommend to use the as. So now you're asking why aliasing, right? So a table name is probably too long if you want to refer to the columns in themselves, because here you see we have no alias, and then we have, if we want to explicitly say we want business entity ID from that table, of course in this case we have only one, but imagine we had more, then we had to say person dot business entity ID. So this would be this, and then we have to come up with the column name. Okay, alias needed for writing easy joins or subqueries. I told you if we have more tables involved, we have to state for what table we need those. We will cover this really quick in joins as well. So this is basically it for the from clause itself. It's not that sophisticated. Let's just move on to select real quick, so that we can cover up this in a very short video, so I can make another big video about the whole inbuilt function stuff. So a select clause evaluates the expression that define the query result. You saw it already, alright? In this query here, so in the select query we just took the columns right as they are, but we can modify and play with these columns quite a bit before we output them to the user. So for instance, we can also alias the column names as we could alias the from clause. We can use these as distinctor element duplicators as well. I will show you later how this works. So just for now we have this query here where we just select the business entity ID, first name and last name from the person, so nothing fancy here. So the from states we're the source of data, and the select is the filter results. So we are filtering what columns we want to have. We can apply math to it, because normal mathematical operators work, and we can also rename the columns, and we can also, what is not written here, apply much more functions and operators on it. You will see this in the next session, but we will start with this at the end of this session already. So we can also say select just a star, asterisk. That means all columns. Don't use it in production though, because you could potentially slow down performance, because only select data you actually really need. There's a big downside of using a star, because imagine you have a select star and if in the first place you have only 3 columns for your table, but then later on somebody adds like 20 columns over the time, and then you will also select those columns although you only want 2 or 3. So please don't do the star in production. Aliasing columns, yeah, you can alias columns or whole expressions even under select, because you already saw that when I just do select one without any from, I also could select it as it would be a column, right? So of course you see here no column name. I can alias this one, so I can give this whole thing a name, right? We will see it very soon. Yeah, there's 3 possibilities basically. The first is we take the column and expression, add an as, like in the from clause, and then we have whatever we want to alias it. There's also the possibilities that we omit the as and just take a blank space, like we saw it also in from. And there's the third possibility that we say alias equals, and then we state the expression. We will have an example for every 3 parts. So for the first, it's here like this. We have business entity ID, we rename it to BE_ID. As you can see here, we now renamed it, right? So it worked. We can do the same thing with then equals, right? So this is the exact same thing. We rename this as the alias, and this is the actual column name that is now renamed. Okay, and we can also do it without NES, but just with the blank space, it's the same thing. The problem though is, it is very easy to fuck this up. For instance, if I just take here, you see it like this, we have the BE ID, the first name and the last name. If I just fuck it up and I just take out the comma here, not on purpose but just accidentally, then the whole query won't even fail. What it will do, it will work. What did it happen here? So you have now the column first name renamed as last name. And this is very, very, very bad, because you think you're seeing the last names because it's stated here in the header, but you actually are seeing the first names just renamed. The column is just renamed the last names. So this is very dangerous. This is why also in select clause I really much tell you to use the version with as, or you use this version with an equals if you are more familiar with this, because you're coming from programming or whatever. So please never use the blank space version. Okay. When referring to identifiers of objects, tables, etc., you can use both double quotes or quote or those quotes. Yeah. So we can refer to the person table and the person schema with double quotes, and we can refer to it with those brackets, right? The thing is, you don't need them. As long as there's not any specific characters in it, you don't need it. It's normal, that's why I say here, it's normally optional, but when using reserved words like operator names, it is required to do either brackets or double quotes. When using spaces in identifiers, it is required. For instance, I could create a table called person blank space and then person interests or whatever. When identifier does not start with a letter, an @ an underscore, or a hash, then we have the hashtag. Then we have the problem that we also need to embrace the whole thing with quotes, either these or those. So we can see it right here. So we have here the case that we have a select and we want to rename it, and we can't because this has a blank space. This will fail. The same thing with this one, because it's not starting with one of those signs. Fail. Incorrect syntax. He can't do shit. So what we can do is we can select it and we quote it, right, with the quotes here. Okay, this works. So we now rename the column to fancy number, and the content is of course a 1. The same thing we can of course do with double quotes, and the same thing applies as well to our example with the number in front. Keep in mind that it's optional for either column names or table names or table aliases, whatever, but you have to do it if it's not starting with a letter, an underscore, or a hashtag. Okay, let's come to distinct though. Distinct eliminates duplicate rows. So for instance, let's just select all the last names from the persons table, right? Okay, so we will have some duplicates because there are many Adams here, many Adams, many Allens as well. So but we only want to have the distinct values. We don't want to have every last name since it's repeating all the time. So we just say select distinct last name. It works like a charm, right? We have only one Adam and only one whatever Allen and stuff like this. So we only have the distinct value, and also have a number. Look at this. While we selected here in the right corner, in the bottom right, we have 19,972 rows, and if we do distinct them, of course we have less. We have only so we can say we have only 1,206 distinct last names. Okay, this is a good information. We need this in the future, but be careful, only use it when you really have to use it, because it can be a performance issue. We will cover this in an advanced session or in the basic session much later. Okay, so now an exercise for you. I read the questions that's stated here, then you can pause the video and then you can solve it, right? And we will compare results afterwards. So let's just so you have to connect to AdventureWorks 2012 database. If you don't know how to do it, then please click on this area here where it shows you a link how to install the example databases. That is also AdventureWorks 2012. So if you have done this, please write a query that displays all addresses can be found in the schema person in the table address. Addresses have to be in the city New York, so we want to only have addresses that are in the city New York. Output the following columns in the exact stated order. We want to have the state province ID renamed to state prov ID. Afterwards we want to have the address line 1 renamed to first address line. And as the last column we want to have postal code renamed to postal code with a blank space between postal and code. Please also make sure that you use the table alias big capital letters ADR. Okay, you can pause the video now, do your query, and if you are done with it, we will continue. Okay, so maybe you did it, maybe you did it not. We will now solve the whole riddle. This would be the query that I supposed to have. We are selecting person address. You can also use AdventureWorks as a 3-part identifier. Whoops, so this is also possible. Of course you then don't have to delete the person schema, so this would also be possible. So we are querying this table, we use the ADR alias. Then you could do this is optional to have it in the columns as a prefix, but we can also use it now. To the state province ID, rename to state prov ID. This has to be escaped somehow with single quotes or double quotes, and for the postal code we can just take also those codes. Will work the same way. So now you have the column renamed here, and here you have the actual data from the table. So yeah, so far so good, right? If you could do this easily, then you're basically up to the level that we need. Okay, I will end this session now. It was a long session again, sorry for that, but we now have really a good insight about our from and select clauses. Please be sure to subscribe to my channel to get the latest content. We will go on in the next session with inbuilt functions and cast and convert data types one to another. Thanks for watching.